All right, so you've delegated, you've given an assignment, and it didn't go well. Now you have to take corrective action. This is something else that people are very, very uncomfortable with. So what do? Well, first off, you need to actually evaluate where the task fell apart. Was it on your end? Did you incorrectly delegate? Well, then you need to work on yourself. But if you correctly delegated, now we have to look at the receiving persons and the delegee. May need additional education and training. Maybe you need to restate expectations so that they fully understand. My wife needed to restate her expectations to me, and then we got on the same page. Maybe you're going to want to ask the delegee to show you how they do something. Identify specific checkpoints at where they need to be evaluated. Maybe you need to do more spot checks more frequently. And then evaluate your directions. Did you give good, clear directions? So how about through leadership style? There are different ways of identifying the ability and motivation. We're going to gradually decrease task behaviors, the lists we give. We're going to gradually decrease relationship behaviors, the buddy, I'm on the same team with you. So in other words, you're slowly going to pull back to true delegation, which is low task, low relationship. Remember to allow for safe performance slower or different than your own. Just because you can do something really good, really fast, doesn't mean everybody else can. And so you need to make allowances for that. That doesn't mean you can't expect them to get better over time, but you have to give them the time to get better. And delegation initially takes a lot more time, especially when you first start delegating tasks. You'll be doing a lot of crisis management, a lot of checking up on people, but over time, those relationship behaviors will disappear. Examine any problem behaviors. Compare that to usual performance and look at your current leadership style. If you're very hands-off, if you rarely check on your people because you know they do everything right, and things start going wrong, that's probably a reflection on your leadership style. You're being too hands-off. But sometimes you do need to have formal corrective performance. Informal counseling, just pull them aside and say, hey, I've noticed this, this, and this. We need to make correction action. If it continues, you may have to have a more official written warning. May lead to suspension or possibly termination. Those are drastic. But you know sometimes you have to do that when people don't improve. If that is going on, work with your supervisor and human resources to make sure that everything is done correctly. The goal is to not get rid of people. The goal is to improve and correct performance. Ideally, you want to have people who know what's going on and are really good at doing that. Now, there are methods in changing when you need to change a system. We've talked about this earlier in previous lectures, but the whole freeze, change, and refreeze practice is how we do this. So when something is going on, when you need to make a major change in practice, you need to unfreeze. You need to make sure you explain the why, provide that information in detail, make sure people really get it. They buy the why for this big change. Make sure you acknowledge that, well, this is going to be hard, or it's going to be slower, or we're going to make mistakes. But acknowledge that. Acknowledge that, yeah, for a while you're going to feel awkward. It's okay. We all will. Make sure but you have to acknowledge that. And don't make these big changes while you're changing something else. So if you're changing to a whole new computer system, don't change to a whole different pharmacy system until one change is done. That's too much to ask for of everybody. So after you've unfroze, they've bought the why, now make the change. You're going to start with high task, high relationship at first. That's selling. You're going to be giving them detailed lists and being right with them the whole time. You're going to be helping them learn the new computer system. Eventually, you're going to move to low task, high relationship. Fewer lists, but you're still there helping them along. You're going to modify this changing plan as it goes along because, hey, no plan works perfectly. So you're going to be making changes as you go along, and that's realistic. If you refuse to make changes, you will lose people because now you aren't buying the why. Know that changing a group is hard. It's never going to be as fast as you want. It's going to be much harder, and you will get those people that really, really fight it. That's where the high relationship comes in, where you're working with them. You'll be selling to some people for a long time. Major changes often produce a lot of stress, so be prepared for that. Maybe have stress releasers. Maybe have a reward, built into this, where you meet certain key steps along this goal. At every key point, have a little bit of a reward. Acknowledge, great job so far. Now let's move on to the next step. And then, of course, after the change, you need to recognize success. Acknowledge that they did a good job. And refreeze. Make that change part of everything. So, I skipped a slide. Sorry about that. So, let's get away from the change cycle for a second. What happens if you do have performance problems? Is it one or two people? Or is it the whole team? If it's one or two people, you need to look at knowledge level and motivation. Maybe they just don't understand the why. That's motivation. Maybe they don't know how to do it. They could be embarrassed. They could have been taught. But just because you taught something once doesn't mean you know how to do it. If you've been taught something once a year ago and now you have to do it, some people are embarrassed to say, I don't really remember. So look to see that. Is it knowledge-based? Is it motivation-based? And use good coaching and progressive discipline. You may not ever need a discipline. Good coaching, good teaching, reinforcement of the why may be all that's necessary. Is it the entire team? Or is it an entire class of people? Is it all the CNAs? Or is it all the LPNs, all the RNs? Is it one entire shift, one wing? Look for that. If it's that, it usually isn't going to be knowledge and motivation. It's going to be a system issue. And system issues usually happen when there's a communication breakdown between the top layers and the lower layers. Somebody missed something. There's a breakdown. So that's when it's a large number of people. So what to do with preliminary behaviors? We kind of talked about this already. Very informal. Hey, I noticed. I saw this happen. I want to make sure you understand that the expected behaviors are this, and this. Very, very low level. If it gets worse, you're gonna have to be more official. Bring in paperwork and maybe bring in HR. You want to have a standard approach, though. You want to make sure that you handle every problem roughly the same way. Not exactly the same way, obviously, but roughly the same way. Because that way, you won't miss anything. And if you're going to have a written notice, make sure the written notice is in a template format so that you document the same information each time. It'll just prevent any problems from later on if somebody complains. Key behaviors, give a set that a serious talk is coming. Come in, you might say, why don't you come in and close the door behind you, or come and sit down, or, those are keys. Of course, it's going to ratchet up the panic level in the person immensely because people know when you tell them to close the door behind you. It's never a reward happening. But acknowledge the person, and then clearly state the problem. Not that they are wrong, but you want to mostly talk behaviors. And then, here's the important step. Ask them their side of the story. Find out what they know. Get their perspective. They may not have remembered a specific skill from a year ago. They may have been out on a day that something was taught. You never know what it is, and you won't know until you ask. Here's another thing. Here's the next step, and this is gonna totally freak people out. Ask that person what they would do to solve the problem. Ask them for the solution. You'll be surprised at how aware people are of what needs to be done. So, state the problem, ask their viewpoint of it, and then what would they do for a solution? And then agree on plans. Give them an oral or a written warning. Written is always best. Set up a review date, and then end it. And end it. You do not have to come back and remind them over and over and over. They know. Just end it. That doesn't mean you forget it. It just means you refrain from bringing it up and reminding them. Nobody likes to have mistakes thrown in their face multiple times. When you as a student, you make a mistake, you know, right? You make a med error, you know. I don't have to remind you of it every week. You're kicking yourself harder than I ever could kick you, right? So when you have a corrective action with your employee, do the same thing. What about absenteeism? They aren't at work. Now, there could be a lot of reasons, but they're not at work. Bottom line, they're not at work. If you don't make clinical, it sort of doesn't matter what the reason is. You're not at clinical. And clinical is where you prove that you can do the job. To me and the other instructors, at work, you are doing the job for your boss. If you're not there, you're not there for whatever reason. But you might want to find out what's going on. And maybe there's a workaround. Let's say your person is chronically late. Chronically late. They're scheduled to work, 8 to 4. And they never show up until 8:30 every day. And you've talked to them. You've pointed out the expectations, the time schedule. They know all that, and yet they show up every day. So you sit down and you ask them, so tell me what's going on. Suppose they say, my child gets on the bus at 8 o'clock. There's nobody at home to make sure that they get on the bus at 8 o'clock. I have no support system. There is no way I can arrive at work earlier than 8:30. Well, now we know what the problem is, right? Now we can find a solution. What's a potential solution here? Is it possible for their shift to be changed from 8 to 4 to 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5? How would that hurt anybody? You know, this is right brain, outside the box thinking, finding a way to meet their need and my need. Make sure that they actually, but do you really want the job? You know, maybe they're not happy anymore. Maybe they just won the lottery. Wouldn't that be something? But listen, find out what the root of the problem is. That's always going to be the best solution. What's the root cause of what's going on? Other problems, you know, the unsafe subordinate, I've never really encountered that I can remember. I don't want to. A violent or threatening employee would be a major problem. Lack of action by a supervisor, that's a big deal. If the supervisor never does anything, then whose the fault is it? It's the supervisor's fault. And then the impaired nurse, and we're going to come back with the last section and talk about impaired nurse and how to handle that.